A rusted iron key, pressed into the palm of a young woman who has held nothing of value in 14 years. Outside her window, a Greyhound bus idles in the gray dawn, its destination a town she has never seen, in a state she has never visited, on a road that ends at a farmhouse she has never known. The letter in her other hand trembles. Someone has been waiting for her, someone who is no longer alive. A red barn half a continent away sits silent under a Vermont sky. Stone walls older than memory. A locked wooden box with her name carved into the lid. And in the distance, gravel crunching beneath the tires of a long black car. Someone else is coming. Someone who has been waiting too. My hand shook as I opened that envelope. The paper was yellowed, soft at the edges, like it had been waiting for years to be touched. Inside was a rusted key and a slip of paper. The handwriting on it trembled like the writer had been fighting to hold the pen steady. My darling girl, I've waited 14 years for you. I cannot wait any longer, but there is something waiting for you in the barn. Don't let anyone take it before you get there. I read it 3 times. My darling girl. No one had ever called me that. Not once. Not in 21 years. And the grandmother who wrote those words had been dead 3 months before that letter ever reached my hands. My name is Marlo Ashby. Most people just call me Mar. Though honestly, not many people called me much of anything. That Tuesday morning in March, cold oatmeal in a chipped bowl, powdered milk that never quite dissolved. The same breakfast I'd eaten for 14 years at St. Bernadette's Home for Children in Cleveland, Ohio. But this Tuesday was different, because this Tuesday was the last one. The state of Ohio had officially run out of reasons to keep me. 21 years old, aged out, done. The foster care system doesn't believe in extended stays. Once you hit 21, you're out, ready or not. I wasn't ready. I sat on the edge of my narrow bed, 2 duffel bags, 1 backpack, 14 years of life crammed into 3 pieces of luggage. Some clothes, mostly secondhand, a few books I'd scavenged from library sales, and 1 photograph. The photograph showed 2 people I barely remembered. My mother, dark hair pulled back in a ponytail. My father, his arm around her waist. Both of them young, both of them smiling, standing in front of a white farmhouse I didn't recognize. They died when I was 7, a car accident on a rainy November night. One minute I had a family, a home, a life that made sense, and the next minute, nothing. Nothing but that photograph, and a tired social worker explaining that I'd be going somewhere safe. Somewhere safe turned out to be a lot of places. Foster homes that didn't work out. Group facilities when nobody else would take me. I learned early, don't unpack, don't get too comfortable, don't expect anything to last, because nothing ever did. Mrs. Pratt knocked on my door at exactly 8 o'clock. She was a social worker assigned to my case. Tired woman in her 50s. The kind of tired that comes from watching too many kids walk out of your office and never come back. She gave me that smile, the sympathetic one, the one that meant somebody was about to deliver bad news. Marlo, are you ready? I nodded. What else could I do? She walked me down the hallway one last time, past rooms full of younger kids still safe in the system, past the cafeteria where I'd eaten thousands of forgettable meals, past the common room, past the chipped paint and the buzzing fluorescent lights and the smell of industrial cleaner that would never quite leave my memory. In her office, she pulled out a folder with my name on it. 14 years of my existence, reduced to 1 thin folder. You have your identification, your birth certificate, your social security card. Yes, ma'am. You understand the resources available to you, the transitional housing program, job placement services. Yes, ma'am. She paused. Her hand went to an envelope sitting separate from my file. Something flickered across her face. Surprise, maybe curiosity. There's one more thing. This came for you last week from a law office in Vermont. I almost forgot about it. I took it. The envelope was thick, cream-colored, expensive, the kind of paper that whispered money before you even opened it. The return address read Whitlock and Associates, Burlington, Vermont. I'd never known anyone in Vermont. I'd never known anyone who used paper this nice. I opened it like it might bite. Inside was a letter from an attorney named Cornelius Whitlock. It said my maternal grandmother, Opal Ashby, had passed away 3 months ago, at the age of 79. I read the words twice. My grandmother. I barely remembered her. There had been visits when I was very young, before the accident, blurry memories of a white farmhouse, of hands that smelled like wood shavings, of a voice calling me little one. But after my parents died, nothing. The system had tried to contact her when I entered foster care. She declined to take custody. Too old, they said, lived too remotely, unable to care for a child. That rejection burned for years. My own grandmother hadn't wanted me. I had family out there somewhere, someone connected to me by blood, and she had chosen to let me become a ward of the state rather than take me in. I spent so many nights wondering why. What was wrong with me? That even my own grandmother didn't want me. Was I too difficult? Too damaged? Was there something fundamentally unlovable about me that everyone could see but me? Eventually, I stopped wondering. I locked those questions away in a part of my heart I tried never to visit. It was easier to believe I had no one than to believe someone had chosen to abandon me. But this letter, according to this letter, my grandmother had left me something in her will: a farm in rural Vermont, 60 acres of land, a farmhouse, a barn, various outbuildings, and a savings account containing approximately $12,000. $12,000. I had $47 in my pocket. I had never in my life possessed more than a few hundred at once. 12,000 might as well have been 12 million. And a farm, 60 acres. I didn't even know how big 60 acres was, but it sounded enormous. It sounded impossible. It sounded like a mistake. Mrs. Pratt was watching me. Everything all right. My grandmother died. She left me a farm. The words sounded absurd coming out of my mouth, like I was reading lines from somebody else's life. Girls like me didn't inherit farms. Girls like me inherited nothing but bad luck and low expectations. A farm in Vermont, Marlowe. This could change everything for you. Could it? I wasn't sure I believed that, because in my experience, when something seemed too good to be true, it usually was. There would be a catch. There was always a catch. But still, a farm, 60 acres, a farmhouse with my family name attached to it, and a grandmother who had rejected me 14 years ago, but had apparently thought about me. At the end, why? Why leave me anything after all this time? If she didn't want me when I was a scared 7-year-old who needed her, why did she want me to have her farm now? I called the number on the letterhead from a payphone outside St. Bernadette's. My hands were still shaking. I had to dial twice before I got the numbers right. Mr. Whitlock answered on the third ring. His voice was warm, professional, the voice of a man who had spent decades delivering both good news and bad, with equal dignity. Miss Ashby, I've been hoping you'd call. I am so sorry for your loss. My loss. As if I'd lost something. As if you could lose someone you never really had. Your grandmother was very specific in her instructions. She wanted you to have the farm when you turned 18, or when you aged out of the system, whichever came first. She also left a letter for you that I am required to deliver in person, along with several other items she wanted you to have. Why didn't she? I stopped myself. The question felt too big for a phone call, but Mr. Whitlock seemed to understand. Your grandmother had her reasons. I think her letter will explain. When can you come to Burlington? When could I come? I had nowhere else to be. No job waiting, no apartment lined up, no life to return to. The transitional housing program had a waiting list 3 months long. As soon as I can get there. I used some of my precious $47 to buy a Greyhound bus ticket, Cleveland to Burlington, nearly 12 hours, with stops in places I'd never heard of and would probably never see again. I boarded with my 2 duffel bags in my backpack, settled into a seat near the back, watched the world slide past through a scratch window. The other passengers were a mix, tired travelers, people who looked like they were running from something, or towards something, or just running. I fit right in. As Ohio gave way to Pennsylvania, and Pennsylvania to New York. I thought about my mother. Her name was Rosalind Marie Ashby. She had grown up on that farm in Vermont. She had walked those 60 acres, lived in that farmhouse, known my grandmother in ways I never would. What had made her leave? The letter mentioned that she had been estranged from my grandmother for years before the accident. Why? What could drive a daughter away from her mother so completely? I pulled out the photograph and studied it again. That white farmhouse in the background. Was that the farm? Was I looking at the place I was about to inherit, without even knowing it? My mother's face gave me no answers. She just smiled at the camera. Young, beautiful, and utterly unaware that she had less than a decade left to live. I fell asleep somewhere in New York, woke up as we crossed into Vermont. The landscape had changed while I slept. Rolling hills covered in the last patches of winter snow. White farmhouses with red barns. Stone walls that wound through fields like ancient rivers frozen in place. It looked like a postcard. It looked like a different world. Entirely. From the flat gray streets of Cleveland I had left behind. Mr. Whitlock's office was in a converted Victorian house. Burlington. The kind of place that held on to its original character, even behind a polished brass nameplate. He met me in the foyer. A man in his mid-60s, gray hair, brown eyes that crinkled at the corners when he smiled. He looked like the kind of grandfather I used to imagine having, back when I still let myself imagine such things. Miss Ashby, Marlowe, thank you for coming all this way. He led me to his office, settled me into a worn leather chair. Then he pulled out a sealed envelope. My name was written across the front, in unsteady script, each letter formed with visible effort. She spent a long time on it, toward the end, writing and rewriting until she got it right. He handed me the keys. The financial records, the property documents, the bank account showed a balance of $12,347.16. Then his expression grew serious. There is something else. Your grandmother was very specific about this. She said to trust a man named Bram Eldridge. Completely. He has been looking after the property since her death. And she said to be careful, that not everyone who comes to you will have good intentions. She seemed concerned about protecting you from something. A chill ran down my spine. What had my grandmother been afraid of? I found a small diner near the bus station. Ordered coffee I didn't really want, just to have somewhere to sit. The vinyl booth creaked when I slid into it. The place smelled of bacon grease and strong coffee. A few locals sat at the counter, paying no attention to the girl with the duffel bags and the shell-shocked expression. I opened my grandmother's letter. My dearest girl, not Marlowe, not Miss Ashby, my dearest girl. I imagine you are confused, probably angry too. You have every right to those feelings. I will not insult you by asking for forgiveness. I am not sure I deserve it. What I can offer you is an explanation, and I hope, a chance at the life your mother would have wanted for you. The letter went on for pages. She explained everything. And with each word, the story I had told myself about my life began to crack apart. She and my mother had been estranged before the accident, a falling out that had festered for years, over choices and stubbornness and pride. Pride, The kind of pride that masquerades as principle until it is too late to tell the difference. When social services contacted her about taking me in, she had wanted desperately to say yes, but she was 65 years old, living alone on a remote farm with no support system, declining health, already struggling to take care of herself. I convinced myself it was selfless, that you deserve better than an elderly grandmother in the middle of nowhere. I told myself the system would find you a good family. I was wrong. I was a coward, and I have spent every day since regretting the choice I made. She couldn't take me in, but she had never stopped thinking about me. She had contacted social services regularly, requesting updates. She had set aside money every year. She had planned, obsessively, for the day I would age out of the system. The farm is your inheritance. It has been in our family for 5 generations. I want you to have it. Do with it what you wish. But if you want to keep it, everything you need to begin is waiting for you. And then, the warning. There is something waiting for you in the barn, in the tack room at the back. It will explain everything else you need to know. But please, darling girl, be careful. There are people who might try to take what belongs to you now. Not everyone can be trusted, but Bram Eldridge is a good man. He was my friend for 30 years. Trust him. The letter ended with words that blurred as my eyes filled. I am sorry I was not brave enough to be the grandmother you deserved, but I hope this farm can give you the foundation I failed to provide. I love you, Marlo. I have always loved you, even when I could not find the courage to show it. I sat in that diner for a long time, all those years of feeling unwanted, all those nights wondering what was wrong with me, and she had been thinking about me the whole time. It didn't erase the loneliness, but something shifted inside me, like a key turning in a lock I had forgotten existed. That was when she appeared. A woman, maybe in her early 60s, silver hair pulled back in a soft bun, a wooden cross on a leather cord around her neck. She held a string of prayer beads loosely in one hand. She stopped at my booth. Her eyes were kind, but they held something else, something old and aching. Forgive me, child, but you must be Rosalind's daughter. The world stopped. I couldn't breathe, because no one, ever, in 21 years, had called me Rosalind's daughter. You have her eyes and her mouth. Lord in heaven, you look exactly like her. Who are you? Etta Brightwell. I am the pastor at the Methodist Church in Hartfield, the little town just past your grandmother's farm. I baptized your mother when she was a baby, and I have prayed for you every Sunday for 14 years. I just stared at her. 14 years, every Sunday. Your grandmother, Opal, she came to that church every week, always sat in the last pew, always lit one candle, always prayed for the same thing. What did she pray for? Pastor Etta's eyes filled. For you to come home, and for her to live long enough to see it. She got half of what she asked for. God brought you home. He just took her a little too soon. She slid into the booth across from me, set something on the table between us. A worn leather Bible, the cover cracked, the pages soft from years of handling. This was hers. She wanted you to have it. I have been carrying it with me for 3 months, waiting for the day you might walk into this town. I knew you would, eventually. I touched the Bible. The leather was warm. There is something inside the front cover. She put it there a long time ago. She told me, if Marlo ever comes, make sure she sees this. My fingers trembled as I opened the cover. Pressed between the inside leather and the title page was a card, cream-colored, dried, the edges yellowed by time. A simple card, like the kind you tuck into a flower bouquet. The handwriting on it was small, looping, beautiful. 3 words. Mama, I'm sorry. That was all. No date, no name, no explanation. But I knew that handwriting. I had carried 2 faded birthday cards through every foster home of my childhood, studying every loop, every curve, trying to remember the hand that wrote them. This was my mother's writing. My mother had written this. Sometime, somehow, she had reached out. When? When did she write this? Pastor Etta shook her head slowly. I don't know, child. Opal never told me, but she kept it in her Bible. For as long as I can remember, she would touch it sometimes, during the service, like it was the most precious thing she owned. I closed the Bible, held it against my chest. It smelled like cedar, like the church, like my grandmother's hands, like a woman I never got to know. Pastor Etta reached across the table, took my hand. Her skin was thin, cool, the skin of an older woman who had held a lot of grieving people across a lot of tables. Welcome home, Marlo. You have a community waiting for you, whether you know it yet or not. She squeezed my hand once, and then she was gone, like an angel who had finished her errand. I sat in that booth for another 20 minutes, holding the Bible, trying to make sense of any of it. Then I called the number for Bram Eldridge. A gruff voice answered on the second ring. Eldridge. Mr. Eldridge, this is Marlo Ashby, Opal's granddaughter. A long pause. When he spoke again, his voice had changed, softer. Been wondering when I'd hear from you. Your grandma talked about you all the time, especially toward the end. He cleared his throat. You need a ride out to the farm. It's about 45 minutes from Burlington, and I'm guessing you don't have a car. We arranged to meet the next morning. I spent that night in the cheapest motel I could find, lying awake, staring at the ceiling. The Bible sat on the nightstand, the note tucked safely inside, something waiting in the barn. People who might try to take what belongs to me. Trust Bram. I closed my eyes, but sleep didn't come. Bram Eldridge arrived at exactly 8 in the morning. He drove a mud-spattered pickup truck. That looked like it had survived 30 years of Vermont winters. He was a tall man, late 50s, weathered skin that spoke of decades spent outdoors, kind eyes that crinkled when he saw me waiting on the motel steps. He shook my hand firmly. You look just like her. You know that. My grandmother. Same gray eyes. I had heard that before, about my mother, but hearing it about my grandmother felt different, like a thread connecting me to someone I had tried so hard to forget. We drove into the countryside. The roads got narrower, the houses farther apart. Stone walls lined the fields. Some looked so old they might have grown out of the earth itself. The sky was heavy with clouds that threatened late winter snow, but there was something beautiful about the bareness of the landscape, the way you could see for miles across the sleeping fields. Your grandmother loved this land, said it was in her blood, same as breathing. But my mother left. He nodded slowly. She did. That nearly broke Opal's heart. He glanced at me. Your mother's name was Rosalind. Rosalind Marie Ashby. Prettiest girl in the county. According to your grandma. Stubborn as a stone wall, too. We turned onto a gravel driveway, marked by a weathered wooden sign. Ashby Family Farm. Established 1888. 1888. Over 130 years of my family's history rooted in this one piece of land. The farmhouse came into view first. A classic New England structure, white clapboard, green shutters, a wraparound porch that sagged slightly on one side. The paint was peeling in places. A few windows had been boarded against the winter, but even in its current state, there was something solid about it, something that spoke of endurance. Needs some work, but the structure's sound. New roof 5 years ago. Furnace replaced last winter. Foundations as solid as the day it was laid. Behind the house stood a large red barn. Its paint faded to a soft rust color. Several smaller outbuildings scattered around the property, and beyond them. Fields stretched toward the tree line. 60 acres. In the city, you measured your space in square feet. Here it seemed to go on forever. Bram led me toward the barn. When he slid open those massive doors, what I saw inside stopped me dead. I had expected farming equipment, old hay bales, rusted tools, forgotten things. What I found instead took my breath away. The main area had been transformed into a workshop. Tools hung on pegboards along the walls, organized with obsessive precision. Workbenches ran the length of both sides, worn smooth from years of use. Half-finished projects sat on stands, pieces of furniture in different stages of completion. But it was the back section that made my heart stop. A professional furniture-making studio, specialized saws, lathes, sanders. Finishing equipment filled the space, all expensive, all meticulously maintained. Shelves held different types of wood, each one labeled, each one stored with care. Oak, maple, cherry, walnut. Woods I had only ever seen in furniture stores, never in their raw form. And along one wall stood at least a dozen completed pieces. Tables, chairs, cabinets, decorative items. Each one crafted with a level of skill that seemed impossible. The wood glowed with deep finishes. The joinery was so precise you couldn't see where one piece ended and another began. Your grandmother was one of the finest furniture makers in Vermont, self-taught, started after your grandfather died, as a way to cope. Turned out she had a real gift. I walked through the studio in a daze, running my fingers over the smooth surfaces. Each piece showed not just skill, but artistry and love. These weren't just furniture. These were pieces of someone's soul, made visible, in wood. She sold to galleries and collectors all over New England. That's how she supported herself. That's where the money she left you came from. Every piece she had sold, every hour bent over her workbench, and the money had gone into an account, waiting for me. I hadn't even known I had a home to come to. Bram led me to the tack room at the back of the barn. Inside was a desk, a filing cabinet, wooden boxes stacked neatly against the wall, journals labeled with dates and topics, 47 USB drives, each numbered and dated, business cards from galleries, a ledger showing 20 years of sales. My grandmother had built an entire business, an entire life, and she had left it all to me. At the bottom of the last box, I found a smaller wooden container, beautifully crafted, my name carved into the lid, in elegant script, Marlowe. When I tried to open it, I discovered it was locked. No key in sight. Beneath my name, carved into the wood. 3 more words. Open when ready. She worked on that box for months, wouldn't tell me what was inside, just said it was the most important thing she had to give you, and that you'd find the key when you were meant to. That evening, Bram brought me to his house for dinner. His wife, Winifred, was a warm, round-faced woman who pulled me into a hug like I was her own granddaughter. The moment we met, she had prepared pot roast with root vegetables and fresh-baked bread. That filled her kitchen with a warmth I hadn't felt in 14 years. As we ate, Winifred brought my grandmother to life in ways the letter in the barn never could. Opal was stubborn as stone, but generous to her bones. When Bram broke his leg 6 years ago and couldn't work for 3 months, she hired him to do consulting on her furniture designs, paid him full wages just to sit in her barn and offer opinions. We all knew she didn't need help, but she found a way to support us, without it feeling like charity. She talked about my grandmother's regret. She talked about your mother, Rosalind, all the time, kept a photo on her workbench, and after Rosalind died, part of Opal died too. Then Winifred leaned forward. But she never forgot about you. She followed your life through whatever channel she could find. This wasn't just about property, honey. She wanted to give you a foundation, a skill, a way to build a life. She wanted to give you roots. Then Winifred said something that made me set down my fork. Opal had some kind of trouble years back, someone trying to take advantage of her. She never told us all the details, but I remember her being scared, really scared. And Opal Ashby was not a woman who scared easy. Bram shot Winifred a look across the table. Quick, almost sharp. Then he changed the subject. But I caught it. That flash of warning between husband and wife. Bram was keeping something from me. That night I stayed in their guest room. I should have been exhausted enough to sleep straight through morning. But something kept pulling me back to the window. The Eldridge house sat on a hill, about half a mile from my grandmother's property. From the guest room, I could just make out the silhouette of the red barn against the dark skyline. And at 2 o'clock in the morning, I saw something that made my blood go cold. A light moving inside the barn. A flashlight beam, sweeping back and forth through the darkness. Like someone was searching for something. Someone was in my grandmother's workshop. In the middle of the night, I stood at that window for 20 minutes, watching the light move, my heart hammering against my ribs. I wanted to run over there, confront whoever was trespassing, but I was alone, in a strange place. No phone, no weapon, no idea what I was dealing with. The light disappeared around 2:30. I didn't sleep for the rest of the night. In the morning, I told Bram I wanted to check on the barn before breakfast. He offered to come, but something told me to go alone first. The barn doors were still locked, exactly as we had left them. Nothing looked disturbed from the outside, but when I walked around to the side entrance, I found what I was looking for. Fresh boot prints in the mud, large, heavy, pressed deep into the soft earth, right up to the side door. Boot prints that hadn't been there yesterday. Someone had been here. Someone was looking for something, and I had a sick feeling that I knew exactly what they were after. I spent the next 2 days going through everything. Tools, wood, journals, videos. I watched video 1, then video 2, then 3. My grandmother, younger in the early ones, hair more gray than silver, hands steadier on the tools. She introduced herself to the camera with a self-conscious smile. I am not entirely sure why I am doing this. Maybe because I am getting old and I want someone to remember what I have learned. Maybe because I hope someday my granddaughter will watch these and know who I was, who I really was underneath all the mistakes. My granddaughter, she had been thinking about me 15 years ago, when I was just a child lost somewhere in the system. I watched video after video, taking notes, absorbing not just the techniques, but the philosophy behind them. My grandmother believed furniture should be built to last generations. She believed in honest materials and honest work. She believed the things we create carry pieces of our souls into the future. The wood will tell you what it wants to become. You just have to learn how to listen. On the third morning, I met Tate Calloway. I was struggling to repair a collapsed section of fence in the front pasture. I heard someone call out from the road, "Need a hand with that?" I turned. A young man was walking up the driveway. Tall, lean, sun-darkened skin, brown hair that fell across his forehead. Maybe a year or two older than me. His clothes were practical and well-worn. His boots were caked with the kind of mud you only get from working the land. Every day. Tate Calloway. My family's farm is about 2 miles down the road. Heard Opal's granddaughter had finally arrived. Marlowe. I know your grandmother talked about you often. His smile reached all the way to his eyes. She was a good woman, helped my family out when we needed it most. He told me the story as we worked on the fence together. 6 years ago, his father had been thrown from a tractor at the start of planting season, shattered his knees so badly the doctors weren't sure he would walk right again. The family had no money for hired hands. The fields would not plant themselves. Your grandmother drove over one morning, with her truck loaded with seed, said she had ordered too much for her own garden, and it would go to waste if we didn't take it. Then she just started planting. He drove a fence post into the ground with 3 solid swings. Came back the next day and the day after that. Brought Bram and Winifred, too. They worked our fields for 3 weeks straight, until Dad could get around on crutches. He shook his head. She never called it help. She called it being neighborly, but we would have lost that whole season without her. Before he left that afternoon, Tate mentioned something that tightened the knot already forming in my stomach. Someone's been asking about your grandmother's place. His easy manner shifted to something more guarded. At the diner in town, man in a nice suit, asking who inherited the Ashby property, what condition it was in, whether anyone was living there yet. He looked at me directly. Just thought you should know. 3 days later, the man in the nice suit found me. I was in the barn watching one of my grandmother's videos. When I heard the crunch of tires on gravel, a black SUV had pulled up in front of the farmhouse. Expensive, spotless, the kind of vehicle you rarely saw on dirt roads in rural Vermont. The man who stepped out matched the car perfectly. Charcoal suit, polished shoes, graying hair slicked back from a face that might have been handsome, if it weren't for the coldness in his eyes. His smile when he spotted me didn't reach those eyes at all. You must be Marlowe. He extended his hand. Sterling Vance, I was a business associate of your grandmother's. I shook his hand, because that's what you do. But my stomach tightened immediately. My grandmother's warning echoed. Not everyone who comes to you will have good intentions. I don't think she ever mentioned you. His smile flickered before settling back into place. We had a professional relationship, not personal. I'm in the furniture business, high-end pieces, for discerning collectors. Your grandmother was one of my suppliers for many years. I didn't respond. I had learned in the foster system. Silence often gets you more information than questions. Sterling Vance looked around the property with an appraising eye, taking in the farmhouse, the barn, the field stretching toward the tree line. Beautiful place. Must be worth quite a bit these days. Can I help you with something, Mr. Vance? The pretense of friendliness dropped from his face, like a mask being removed. What remained underneath was harder, sharper, and entirely without warmth. I'm afraid I have some unpleasant news. He pulled a folded document from his jacket. Your grandmother and I had an agreement, a contract, for a large commission she never completed, 10 custom pieces, for a client in Boston, due 6 months ago. She received a $20,000 advance for work she never delivered. He handed me the document. I scanned it, my heart sinking with every line. A formal contract, dated 18 months ago. At the bottom, a signature, Opal R. Ashby, in handwriting that looked almost exactly like my grandmother's. As you can see, your grandmother took a significant advance for work she never delivered. That debt falls to her estate, which means it falls to you. $20,000. My grandmother had left me $12,000. Even if I emptied the entire account, I would still be $8,000 short. I don't have this kind of money. I understand completely. His voice dripped with false sympathy. But I am prepared to offer you a solution. I have contacts in real estate who would be very interested in this property. $50,000 for the farm, the buildings, everything. That covers your debt to me. And you walk away with $30,000 in your pocket. $50,000 for property worth at least $300,000. I might have grown up in the foster system, but I wasn't stupid. I need time to think about this. Of course, but my patience has limits. 60 days after that, I pursue legal action, courts, lawyers, depositions. He handed me a business card. Think it over, Marlowe. I'll be in touch. He turned to leave, and as he turned, I caught his profile in the afternoon light, the angle of his jaw, the line of his nose. Something inside me went still. Cold. I knew that face. But from where? He drove away, and I stood in the driveway, clutching that contract. fear coiling tight in my stomach. I walked back into the house on shaky legs, sat at the kitchen table, and pulled out the photograph of my parents. The only photograph I had, the one I had carried through every foster home of my childhood. I stared at it. Mom, Dad, smiling, young, standing in front of the white farmhouse. The white farmhouse. I had been so focused on my parents' faces all those years that I had never really looked at the rest of the picture. I looked now. The angle of the photograph showed the farmhouse from the front, with a corner of the red barn just visible behind it. Just visible. And in that corner of the barn, almost lost in the shadow, was a figure, a young man, standing with his hands on his hips, watching my parents pose for the camera. I had never noticed him before. In all the years I had stared at this photograph, I had never seen him. I picked up the photograph, held it up to the light, studied that figure in the shadow. Young, maybe in his 20s, dark hair, square jaw I had just shaken hands with. In my driveway, 40 years older, but the same face, Sterling Vance. Sterling Vance had been there, at my grandmother's farm, when my parents were still alive. Sterling Vance had known my mother. The contract slipped from my fingers, drifted to the kitchen floor, and somewhere behind my ribs, something old and buried began to wake up. I drove the photograph to Bram's house before the contract even had time to settle on the floor. I didn't change my shoes, didn't grab a coat, just drove. Winifred opened the door, took one look at my face. Bram, come quick. Something's wrong with the girl. He came in from the back porch, sawdust on his sleeves, a coffee cup in one hand. Marlo, sit down. You're shaking. I don't want to sit down. I want you to look at this. I shoved the photograph across the kitchen table. Bram set the coffee down slowly, pulled reading glasses from his shirt pocket, picked up the photograph, and the color drained from his face. I had never seen a grown man go that gray. Not in real life. It looked like watching a candle burn out. Where did you get this? It's mine. It's been mine since I was 7. Mar. Who is he, Bram? He didn't answer. He sat down, heavily, like his legs had stopped working. Winifred came around behind him, put a hand on his shoulder. Her face had gone the same color as his. Bram, honey, she deserves to know. Winnie, she deserves to know. He set the photograph down, took off the glasses, rubbed his eyes with the heels of both hands. When he looked up, his eyes were red. His name is Sterling Vance. He used to work for your grandmother 40 years ago, before any of this happened. He was at the farm yesterday. What? Yesterday afternoon, he showed up with a contract, said my grandmother owed him $20,000, said I have to sell the farm or he'll take me to court. Bram stood up so fast his chair scraped the floor. That son of a... Bram. Sorry, Winnie, sorry. He paced to the window, stared out at nothing, came back, sat down again. All right, let me tell you, because you need to know everything. He took a deep breath. Sterling Vance came to work for your grandmother the summer your mother was 16. Hired hand, good with horses, decent with carpentry. Opal didn't trust him from day one, but she needed help, and he was cheap. Was he? I stopped. Couldn't finish the question. Was he what, honey? Was he with my mother? Bram looked at Winifred. Winifred nodded. Rosalind was 17 the summer it started. He was 24, charming when he wanted to be. Your grandmother caught them once, out behind the barn, just talking, but she could see what was coming. She told Sterling to stay away from her daughter. He laughed in her face. I felt sick. What happened? He kept after her, brought her gifts, Told her things every young girl wants to hear. Your mother, Rosalind, she was smart. She was smart, but she was 17 and lonely. And he was the first man who ever told her she was beautiful. Did they? No, she came to her senses before that. She told him no. Told him she wasn't going to throw her life away on a man who worked for her mother. And Sterling did not take it well. Bram's hands tightened around his coffee cup until I thought the ceramic would crack. He stole every dollar your grandmother had saved from the safe in the house, almost $8,000, which was a fortune in those days. He stole the family pocket watch, your great-grandfather's. He stole a hunting rifle that had been in the family 3 generations, and then he tried to take Rosalind with him. My breath stopped. Tried to. He came to the house in the middle of the night, told her he loved her, told her they could run away, build a life somewhere new. She told him no, again, and he, well, Bram stopped. Tell her, Bram. Winnie, I can't. You tell her or I will. He closed his eyes. He hit her across the face, hard enough to break a tooth. Your grandmother heard the noise, came down with that hunting rifle, the one he had already stolen but hadn't taken yet, and she put it against the side of his head and told him if he wasn't off her property in 5 minutes, she would paint the porch with his brains. The kitchen was silent, just the hum of the refrigerator, the wind outside, my own heart pounding in my ears. What happened? He left. She called the sheriff. Charges were pressed. Your grandmother testified in court. So did Rosalind. He went to prison for 3 years. Robbery and assault. When he got out, he disappeared. Nobody saw him for decades. I sat there, holding the photograph of my mother, smiling, in front of the farmhouse, with the man who had hit her, standing in the shadow of the barn. Why is he in this picture, Bram? That picture was taken before any of it happened. Probably the summer Rosalind was 16, maybe the year before. Your grandmother told me about that photograph, said your dad sent it to her years later, after they got married, so she'd have a picture of the two of them, even though they were estranged. My dad sent it. David, your father, he always tried to mend things between Opal and Rosalind. Always. Your mother was stubborn. But your dad, he was a kind man. He sent Opal a photo every Christmas for 9 years. Wrote letters, too. Rosalind never knew. I pressed the photograph flat against the table, smoothed the corners, like I was tucking my dead parents in. Why did my mother leave Vermont after Sterling went to prison? Why didn't she just stay? Winifred sat down across from me, took my hand. Because she was ashamed, honey. She blamed herself. She thought she had brought him to the family. She thought if she had never noticed him, he never would have hurt her mother. She couldn't forgive herself. So she ran. To Ohio. To a new school. A new life. She met your father a year later at college. They were happy. They built a life. But she never came back because she couldn't face what she'd done. She didn't do anything. She knew that, up here. Winifred tapped her temple. But not here. She tapped her chest. I stared at the photograph. My mother had been 17 years old, younger than I am now, carrying that for the rest of her short life. And Sterling, Bram's voice was low, he never forgave your grandmother for sending him to prison. Never. He told a guard once, so I heard, that he would have her property someday, one way or another. He said he would take everything she loved, the way she took everything from him. I lifted my head. He's been waiting. Yes, he's been waiting 40 years. Yes, for my grandmother to die. Yes, Marlowe, that's exactly what he's been doing. I left the Eldridge house with the photograph in my coat pocket and the contract folded inside the photograph, and a sick feeling that this was a war that started before I was born, and I was going to have to finish it. Sheriff Roan Pickett had an office in a small brick building on Main Street, between the hardware store and the diner. He was a big man, mid-50s, thick mustache, the kind of steady presence that made you believe problems could be solved. He listened to me for 30 minutes without interrupting once. When I finished, he leaned back and let out a long breath. "So you're Opal's granddaughter?" "Yes, sir. She talked about you every time I saw her in town. Every time. Never stopped hoping she'd see you again." He pulled a thick folder from his desk drawer. "Sterling Vance. 5 years I've been building this file. 5 years. He pulled the same trick on the Hendersons, up by the lake, and the Morrisons before that, down south of here. He waits until someone dies, then shows up with a contract claiming they owed him money. By the time the family figures out what's happening, he's already pressured them into selling. So the contract is fake, almost certainly, but proving it is another matter. The signatures always look authentic enough. Most families just give up and pay." He leaned forward. "Your grandmother was the most meticulous record keeper I have ever known. If there's proof, it's somewhere in her files. A letter, a journal entry, something. And if I don't find it, then he wins. Marlowe, you have to understand, your grandmother knew this was coming. She built that house of records for a reason. He didn't expect you to come back. He waited too long. He gave her time, and she used every minute of it." I drove home. I sat in the barn until the sun went down. Then I started searching. The first night I went through every drawer in the desk. Receipts, sales records, letters from galleries, correspondence with collectors in Boston and Hartford and New York. Nothing. The second night I went through the filing cabinet, tax records back to 1989, equipment manuals, warranty papers, property surveys. Nothing. The third night I started on the journals. She had kept journals for 32 years. 32 leather-bound notebooks, lined up on a shelf in the tack room, each one labeled by year. I sat on the floor with a flashlight and a pillow and started reading. She wrote about everything: the weather, the crops, a neighbor's new baby, a goat that escaped and ate her tomato plants, a sunset she thought was particularly beautiful. And she wrote about my mother. Every entry, through every year, had at least one mention of Rosalind. "Wonder where she is tonight. Her birthday today. Lit a candle, said her name out loud. Heard she got married. Heard from a friend in Ohio. He sounds like a good man. I hope he is. I hope he is kind to her. She had a baby girl. Named her Marlowe. Marlowe. Like the playwright. Like the poet. Of course she would. She was always the brightest mind in this house." That entry stopped me cold. She knew. She knew my name. The moment I was born, 3 days after I was born, I read on. "Sent a card. It came back. Returned to sender. I wonder if Rosalind even knows. I wonder if she's the one sending them back, or if it's the mail, or if I have the wrong address. Tried to send a stuffed bear for her first Christmas. The package came back. The box was crushed. The bear was ruined. I cried like an old fool. 2 years old today. I will keep trying. I will not stop trying." I closed the journal, pressed my face into my hands, cried. I cried for the grandmother I never met, for the granddaughter she never held, for all the years between us. That should have been ours. On the fourth night, I found something I wasn't expecting at all. I was cleaning out the bottom drawer of the desk, checking every corner, when I noticed the drawer seemed shallower than it should be. I pulled it out completely, ran my fingers along the edges, found a small notch hidden in the corner, pressed it, and a false bottom popped open with a soft click. I held my breath, reached in, pulled out a bundle of letters, tied together with a faded blue ribbon, at least 200 of them. My hands trembled as I untied the ribbon and looked at the first envelope. It was addressed to me, Marlowe Ashby, care of the Ohio Department of Child Services. I opened it with shaking fingers. My dearest Marlo, today is your 8th birthday. I hope wherever you are, someone is giving you cake and making you feel special. I wish I could be there. I wish I could hold you and tell you how much your grandmother loves you. I picked up another envelope. My 9th birthday. Another my 10th. Another my 12th. Birthday after birthday. Year after year. There were letters for every birthday I had spent alone. Every Christmas. When I had no family. Letters for the first day of school. For Easter. For random Tuesdays. When she was just thinking about me. And every single envelope was stamped with the same red ink. Return to sender, address unknown, or worse, return to sender, recipient refused. 247 letters. I counted them. I sat there counting them, while my chest broke open like an egg. 247 times. She had tried. 247 times. The system had blocked her. I read them all. Over the next 3 days, I read them in the morning, in the workshop, in the afternoon, by the kitchen window, at night, by candlelight. Because the power flickered in the storm, I read them out loud sometimes, so her words could be in the air, so she could hear herself, wherever she was. In the early letters, she wrote about her guilt, her fears about being too old, too sick, too rural to raise a grieving child. But she also wrote about her hope that I would find a good family. As the years passed, the letters grew more desperate. She hired private investigators. She found lawyers who promised to help her navigate the system. She tracked down a school event. When I was 12, I saw you today. You were playing basketball in the gymnasium. You're so tall now, so beautiful. You look just like Rosalind at your age. I wanted to run to you and hold you, but I was afraid. What if you didn't want to see me? What if I only caused you more pain? I had to stop reading. I went outside, stood in the snow, looked up at the sky. You should have come anyway. You should have come anyway, Grandma. The wind didn't answer, but somewhere, I felt her answer. I know, honey, I know. In letter number 98, she mentioned Sterling Vance. If a man named Sterling Vance ever comes to you with a contract or a claim or a story about money your grandmother owed him, do not believe a word. I have never done business with him. I never will. He is a liar and a thief. He has been waiting most of your life to hurt this family. I do not know when, but he will come. Be ready, Marlo. Be ready. I had the proof. I had her own words, written years before her death, proving she would never have signed anything with Sterling Vance. But the proof was about to become desperately urgent because Sterling Vance wasn't working alone. 2 days after I found the letters, a woman named Adelaide Marsh arrived at the farm, a county vehicle, an official-looking clipboard, a smile that was all teeth and no warmth. She introduced herself as the chairwoman of the town's code enforcement board and told me she was there for an emergency safety inspection of the barn workshop. Standard procedure, when a property changes hands, need to make sure all equipment meets current safety regulations, fire codes, electrical standards, structural integrity. She spent 2 hours examining every inch of the workshop, making notes, with the kind of focus that felt less like diligence and more like hunting. When she finished, she handed me a yellow notice with a list of 12 supposed violations. I am afraid the workshop doesn't meet code. Electrical wiring in the back section is outdated. Fire suppression system isn't up to standard. Several pieces of equipment need certified inspection before they can be operated. My stomach dropped. What does that mean? It means the workshop is hereby ordered to cease operations. You have 7 days to bring everything up to code, or the building will be sealed pending full remediation. No access allowed until compliance is verified. 7 days. If the workshop was sealed, I would lose access to everything. The tools, the wood, the finished pieces, and most importantly, all of my grandmother's records. Everything I needed to fight Sterling Vance would be locked behind a county seal. This seems sudden. The workshop has been operating for decades. Adelaide's smile didn't waver. Regulations change, nothing personal. But it was personal. I was certain of it. Because that evening Tate came by and confirmed what I suspected. Adelaide Marsh and Sterling Vance. His jaw was tight. My dad has been saying for years that they're connected. Connected how? They were married once, 20 years ago, divorced. But everyone in 3 counties knows they still work together. She helps him squeeze property owners with code violations. Then he swoops in with his lowball offers, once they're desperate enough to sell. It wasn't just one man trying to steal my farm. It was a partnership, designed to crush people who had no money, no connections, no way to fight back. People exactly like me. That night, Sterling Vance himself returned. He didn't bother with the suit this time. He wore casual clothes, and his manner was stripped of all pretense. I heard about the inspection. Shame about the workshop. Those repairs will cost a fortune. You sent her. He didn't deny it. I am a patient man, Marlowe, but my patience is running out. He gestured at the dark farmhouse, the sagging porch, the peeling paint. Look around you. This place is falling apart, and so is your little fantasy of keeping it. No court in Vermont is going to side with the girl who showed up 5 minutes ago, over a man with signed contracts and real lawyers. He stepped closer, and his voice dropped to something cold and intimate. Take the money. Walk away before this gets ugly. You knew my mother. He froze just for a half second, but I saw it. What did you say? You knew my mother, Rosalind. You worked here 40 years ago. You stole from my grandmother. You hit my mother. You went to prison. And now you're back to finish what you started. His face went still, like a snake's face, the way the eyes stop moving, right before it strikes. You don't know what you're talking about. I know everything, Mr. Vance. The Eldridges told me, Sheriff Pickett told me, and my grandmother left letters. She wrote about you. She warned me. He took a step back, but the cold smile returned. Letters can be lost, witnesses can change their minds, and inspectors can find more violations. 2 weeks, Marlowe. Not 60 days. 2 weeks. And when this goes to court, don't say I didn't give you a chance. He left me standing in the dark, trembling, with fear and fury in equal measure. I went into the house, closed the door behind me, locked it, sat at the kitchen table, and put my head down on the wood. That night, I almost gave up. I sat alone in my grandmother's kitchen, surrounded by her things, her presence in every worn surface and faded curtain. And I thought about taking the money. $30,000. I could start over somewhere else, some city where nobody knew me, and nobody was trying to steal what little I had. My grandmother's letter sat on the table in front of me. I read the last paragraph again. I hope you will find your roots there, the way I once hoped your mother would find hers. Roots. I had spent my whole life without them, moved from place to place, never staying long enough to grow into anything. And now that I finally had soil beneath me, finally had a place that was mine by blood and history, someone wanted to rip me out of the ground, before I had even had a chance to take hold. There was a knock at the door. 11 o'clock at night. I jumped, reached for the heaviest thing I could find, which was a cast iron skillet on the stove. Walked to the door. Who is it? It's Etta Brightwell, child. I brought you some soup. I opened the door. Pastor Etta stood on the porch, a casserole dish in her hands, wrapped in a tea towel. Her face was pink from the cold. She walked in without being invited. the way only old women and grandmothers can. Set the dish on the stove, lit the burner under it, stirred it with a wooden spoon she must have brought from her own kitchen. She didn't ask me how I was doing, didn't ask what was wrong, didn't pry. She just stirred the soup and let me sit at the table and cried. When the soup was warm, she ladled it into 2 bowls, sat down across from me, pushed a bowl across the table. Eat, honey. I can't. Eat anyway. I ate chicken, carrots, celery, egg noodles soft as a memory. It tasted like my mother's soup. I had not eaten my mother's soup in 14 years. I didn't even know I remembered her soup. But there it was, in my mouth, in my throat. How did you know? Know what, dear? That this is exactly what she used to make. Etta smiled gently. I gave Rosalind this recipe when she was 9 years old. She used to come to my kitchen after school, and we would cook together. Your grandmother was so busy with the farm, with your grandfather's sickness. Your mother needed somewhere to be a child, so she came to me. I set down my spoon. You knew her. I knew her. I loved her. She was a serious little girl with big brown eyes and the strongest sense of justice I have ever seen in a child. When she was 8 years old, she broke up a fight at school because a boy was bullying a girl with a stutter. She walked right between them and stood there with her arms crossed until the principal came. She was tiny, but she was made of iron. I couldn't speak. I just nodded. And she had the worst tantrums of any child in this county. When she was wronged, when the world wasn't fair, she would howl like a banshee. Your grandmother used to say, "That girl is going to change the world," or "burn it down." We never figured out which. Etta reached across the table, took my hand. You have her eyes. Everyone keeps saying that. Because it is true, and honey, she would not want you to give up. I'm scared. I know. He's bigger than me. He has money. He has lawyers. He has another woman helping him. And he's been planning this for 40 years. I know. What am I supposed to do? Pastor Etta took a long sip of her soup, set the spoon down, looked at me with those old blue eyes that had seen more than I could imagine. Faith is not the absence of fear, honey. Faith is fear, with its feet planted in the ground anyway. That's a nice thing to say. It is not a nice thing. It is true. Your grandmother sat in my pew every Sunday for 40 years, through her husband's death, through her daughter leaving, through her daughter dying, through 14 years of watching her own granddaughter grow up in a system that wouldn't let her in. She was terrified, honey. She told me, every Sunday, I am terrified. And then she went home, and she got back up, and she kept working, because that is what faith does. It does not remove the fear. It just gives you somewhere to put your feet. I started crying again. Etta let me. She finished her soup, washed both bowls, dried them, put them in the cabinet. She knew where everything went, because of course she did. She had probably cooked in this kitchen 100 times, before I was even born. At the door, she put her hand on my cheek. You are not alone, child. Whether you can feel it or not, you are not alone. Then she was gone, and I went to bed, and I slept for the first time in a week. I woke up at 6 the next morning. I made coffee. I stood at the kitchen window, sipped the coffee, watched the gray sky slowly turn pink, and then I saw the trucks, pickup trucks, a whole line of them, pulling up my driveway. I set down the coffee, walked to the porch, opened the door, stepped outside. Tate's truck, Bram's truck, a truck I didn't recognize. Another. 23 people standing in my front yard. Bram, Winifred, Pastor Etta, Tate, his father, leaning on a cane, but there, standing. A woman in her 70s I recognize as the owner of the hardware store. A couple from the farm 3 miles east. The Methodist Church choir. Two old men I had only seen at the diner. A young woman with two children who I had never seen at all. They had toolboxes and ladders and rolls of electrical wire and donated fire extinguishers and a new circuit breaker panel still in the box. They had coffee and thermoses and sandwiches wrapped in wax paper. They were prepared to stay all day. Bram walked up to the porch, put his weathered hand on my shoulder. Your grandma took care of this community for 40 years, helped people when they couldn't help themselves, made furniture for the church, never charged a penny, fixed Martin's roof after the storm of '09, planted the Callaway fields when their father couldn't walk, knit a baby blanket for every child born in this town since 1985. He looked back at the crowd, already unloading supplies. Now it is our turn to take care of hers. Pastor Etta climbed the porch steps, stood beside me, looked at the crowd. This is not charity, child. This is community. Your grandmother poured into us for 40 years. We're just pouring back. I could not speak. I just stood there, with 23 people in my yard, looking up at me, like I belonged, like I had always belonged. They worked for 5 straight days. The electricians rewired the back section. The carpenters reinforced the structural supports. Someone donated a commercial fire suppression system. That met every code in the book. Pastor Etta brought meals 3 times a day. Pot roast, chicken pot pies, a meatloaf the size of a tire, pies, apple, cherry, pumpkin. Tate worked beside me from sunup to sundown, without complaint, without flirting, without making it weird. He just worked, and handed me tools when I needed them, and brought me coffee when I was shaking from cold. By the 5th day, the workshop did not just meet code, it exceeded every standard Adelaide Marsh could possibly throw at it. On the 6th day, Bram called the county inspector, a different one, from a different district, and requested a formal reinspection. The workshop passed with a perfect score. The cease operations order was lifted. Adelaide Marsh's weapon had been turned to dust. That night I sat alone in the barn. I loaded the final video on my grandmother's list. Video 47. The last recording she ever made. She looked older in this one than in any of the others. Frailer. Her hands shook as she adjusted the camera. Her voice was rough with exhaustion, but her eyes were sharp, still alive with purpose, still full of the love that had driven her to make all these recordings. Marlo, she looked directly into the camera. If you are watching this, it means I am gone, and you are trying to figure out what to do with everything I have left behind. She smiled, and even through the screen, across time, across death, it felt like she was smiling directly at me. I do not know if you will want to learn this craft. I do not know if you will keep the farm or sell it. Whatever you decide, I will understand. I just wanted you to know that you come from a line of makers and creators. Your great-great-grandfather built this barn with his own hands. Your grandfather made the stone walls that still stand on this property. Your mother was an incredible artist before she left Vermont. She paused. It is in your blood, Marlo. This need to create something beautiful and lasting. Then she leaned forward. Her voice dropped to something urgent. Now listen carefully, because this is the most important thing I have to tell you. I leaned forward too. If anyone ever comes to you, claiming I owed them money, claiming I signed a contract, do not believe it. There is a man named Sterling Vance. He has been trying to hurt this family for 40 years. He came to me once, 8 years ago, tried to pressure me into signing papers. I threw him off my property. He will try again. After I am gone, he will come for you, because he could never have me. She reached off camera, held up a piece of paper. This is my signature, the real one. See this little mark, under the E. She pointed. It is barely visible unless you know to look for it. I have put that mark on every document I have signed since your grandfather died. Every single one. It is my way of making absolutely sure No one can forge my name. If anyone shows you a signature without this mark, you will know it is a fake. I paused the video. My heart was pounding so hard I could feel it in my fingertips. The mark under the E. A tiny line, almost invisible, unless you knew exactly where to look. I grabbed the contract, studied the signature. Opal R. Ashby, in handwriting that looked almost identical to my grandmother's. Almost, because there was no mark under the E. Nothing at all. The signature was a forgery. I held it up to the light. I held it up to the lamp. I held it under the magnifying glass from her workbench. No mark. The contract was fake. I rewound the video. She wasn't finished. There is one more thing, Marlo. I leaned closer. The locked box I left you, the one with your name on it. The key is hidden somewhere only a true craftsman could find it. When you have learned enough to understand what I was trying to teach you, you will know exactly where to look. The video ended. I sat in the dark barn, surrounded by tools, surrounded by my grandmother, surrounded by 40 years of evidence. I clutched the contract in one hand and thought about keys and secrets and everything still ahead. I had proof the signature was forged, but I needed what was in that box. I needed the key, and to find it, I had to become the person my grandmother believed I could be. The key was in the table. It took me 3 more days to figure it out. 3 days of watching my grandmother's videos, over and over, practicing cuts and joints until my hands ached, sawdust coating every inch of my clothes. I was searching for something, a clue, a hint, a breadcrumb she had left, to lead me to the answer. But every time I thought I had it, I didn't. I checked under floorboards, behind picture frames, inside drawer pulls, inside the legs of every chair in the workshop, inside the cookie jar on her kitchen counter, inside an empty flour tin. Nothing. I started talking to her out loud. Grandma, come on, I'm trying. You have to help me a little here. I'm not as smart as you thought I was. The barn didn't answer, but the wind moved through it, and I imagined it was her, sighing at me. It came to me on the 3rd night, 2 in the morning. I was too exhausted to think straight, and my mind had finally stopped trying so hard. I was sitting at the workbench, staring at the cherrywood side table I had built. During my 2nd week at the farm, my first real piece of furniture, following one of her beginner tutorials. Step by step, one leg slightly shorter than the others, the finish uneven in places, nothing that would impress anyone, but I had built it, with my own hands. I ran my fingers over the surface, felt the grain beneath my calloused fingertips, and that's when I remembered. Video 23. My grandmother had demonstrated how to build this exact table. She walked through every step, every cut, every joint, but at the very end, almost as an afterthought, she had added something. That wasn't in the written tutorial. A modification, she called it. A secret compartment built into one of the legs. Invisible, unless you knew exactly where to press. Every piece of furniture should have a secret, something only the maker knows about. It is like leaving a piece of yourself hidden inside the wood. I jumped up from my chair so fast I knocked it over. I grabbed the table, flipped it upside down on the workbench, examined each leg. They looked solid, identical, no seams, but I pressed on the inside of each one, feeling for the slight give. The first leg, nothing. The second leg, nothing. The third leg, click. A small panel popped open, revealing a hollow space carved into the wood, and nestled in that space, wrapped in a piece of worn velvet, was a tiny brass key. My hand shook as I picked it up. Such a small thing, to hold so much meaning. My grandmother had designed this test, knowing that only someone who truly learned her craft would find what she had hidden. She had trusted me to become that person. I held the key against my chest, and I cried. I cried for the granddaughter she believed I could be. I cried for the woman she became. I cried because somewhere along the way, without knowing it, I had become her. I carried the key to the tack room, knelt beside the lockbox. The key slid into the lock like it had been waiting. I turned it, heard the soft click, lifted the lid. Inside, I found three things. The first was a leather-bound journal, different from the others, labeled, business records and important notes. I flipped through it until I found a page dated 8 years ago, and the words hit me like a physical blow. Sterling Vance came to the barn today, tried to pressure me into signing a contract for a commission I never agreed to. When I refused, he threatened to make trouble. I ordered him off my property and told him never to return. This man is a fraud and a criminal, and worse. I will never do business with him under any circumstances. He will try this again someday, if not with me, then with whoever inherits this place after I am gone. Below the entry, she had taped a copy of the contract Sterling had tried to get her to sign. Unsigned, the same format, the same language, almost identical to the one he gave me, and beside it, in red ink, "Keep this as evidence. He will try again." She had known, years ago, that he would come back, and she had prepared the evidence I would need to fight him. The second item was a manila envelope, thick with documents, bank statements going back decades, property records, and a notarized letter from Mr. Whitlock, dated 6 months before her death, certifying that Opal Ashby had never entered into any business arrangement with Sterling Vance or any of his known associates, a formal legal record, witnessed, stamped, filed. I sank to the floor. She had thought of everything, but it was the third item that shattered me completely. A letter, in different handwriting, younger, steadier, without the tremor of age. The envelope was addressed to Opal Ashby at the farm, and the return address was in Ohio, my mother's handwriting. I recognized it from the few cards that had survived my childhood, the ones I had carried through every foster home, like talismans. I held the envelope. I couldn't open it. Not yet. I sat there, on the floor of the tack room, holding my mother's last letter in my hands. The letter was dated 3 days before the accident. My mother had written this 3 days before she died. I had to put it down twice, just to breathe. Finally, I opened it. "Dear Mom," I stopped reading. She called her Mom, not Mother, not Opal, just Mom, like a daughter, who loved her mother despite everything. I picked it up again. I have been trying to write this letter for months, but I could never find the right words. So I am just going to say it. I am sorry. My vision blurred. I had to wipe my eyes with the back of my hand. I am sorry for leaving the way I did. I am sorry for the years of silence. I am sorry for letting pride keep me away for so long. I am sorry for not coming home when Daddy was dying. I will never forgive myself for that. I know you have not forgiven me either. I would not blame you if you never did. I had to stop again. Had to walk to the kitchen, splash water on my face. Come back, sit down, try again. David and I have been talking about what kind of life we want for Marlo, and I keep thinking about the farm, about Vermont, about all the things I ran away from when I was too young and too angry to understand what I was leaving behind. She was talking about me. She had been thinking about me, about bringing me there. I want Marlo to know where she comes from. I want her to walk the fields the way I did as a girl, to learn about our family, to understand that she has roots even if I tried to pretend I didn't. I pressed the letter to my chest, tried to breathe. Were you planning to come visit this summer? I know it has been too long. I know I have no right to ask for your forgiveness, but I am asking anyway. I want to come home, Mom. I want to bring your granddaughter to meet you. I want to start over. The wind moved through the barn. I could hear it. The whole world was very quiet. I love you. I have always loved you, even when I was too stubborn to say it. I hope it is not too late. Your daughter, Rosalind. 3 days later, she was dead. They never made it to Vermont. I never got to walk those fields with my mother. Never got to meet my grandmother as a child. Never got to have the summer she was planning. But she had tried. At the very end, she had tried to come home. She had wanted me to know my grandmother, to have roots, to belong somewhere real. And my grandmother had kept this letter for 14 years, holding it like a sacred thing, a promise that had been made and broken by fate rather than by choice. She had spent the rest of her life trying to give me what Rosalind had wanted, a home, a heritage, a place where I could finally belong. I sat on the floor of the tack room for a long time, holding my mother's letter, letting myself grieve for everything we had lost, for the grandmother I never knew, for the mother I barely remembered, for the family that should have been mine. But mixed with the grief was something else, something fierce and bright and absolutely unbreakable. They had loved me, both of them, in their own imperfect ways. They had loved me deeply, and they had left me everything I needed. I was not going to let Sterling Vance take that away. Not now, not ever. The next morning, I called Sheriff Pickett. I told him what I had found. He was at the farm within the hour, still in uniform. I spread everything on the workbench: the journal entry, the unsigned contract from 8 years ago, the notarized letter from Mr. Whitlock, the signature comparison, my grandmother's real signature, with its telltale mark, beside the forgery, without one, and the warning letter naming Sterling Vance by name, years before her death. Sheriff Pickett studied each piece, with the careful attention of a man who had been waiting years for exactly this moment. This is it. He looked up at me. The journal proves she knew he was a fraud. The unsigned contract shows his pattern. The letter from Whitlock locks it down legally. And this signature. He held up the comparison. You can see the mark under the E on every real document she signed and on his contract. Nothing. It is a forgery. Is it enough? It is enough to arrest him. I have been building a case against Sterling Vance for 5 years. With this, combined with what we have from the other families, we can finally put him where he belongs. He paused. And Adelaide Marsh. We have suspected her involvement for years. If we can connect her to Sterling's operation, the whole network comes down. What do I need to do? Sit tight. Sterling said he was coming back for your answer in 3 days. We will be ready. Those 3 days were the longest of my life. I spent them in the barn, working on a new project. Not because I needed to finish it, but because I needed something to do with my hands, while my mind raced through everything that could go wrong. Tate came by every day, sometimes to help, sometimes just to sit with me, in the quiet of the workshop. We did not need to talk much. There was comfort, simply in knowing I was not alone. On the second evening, he stood beside me at the workbench. I was sanding a piece of maple. His shoulder was close to mine. Whatever happens Friday, you have already won something. What? I know, but you know that, right? I looked at him. Your grandmother spent 40 years trying to reach you. Your mother was 3 days away from bringing you home. And you are here now, standing exactly where they both wanted you to be. He smiled. Sterling cannot take that away, no matter what happens in court. I set the sandpaper down. Tate? Yeah. Thank you for not leaving. I never planned to. He went back to his work, and I went back to mine, and we did not say another word for 2 hours, but the silence felt like a hand on my shoulder the whole time. On Friday morning, I stood in the kitchen, drinking coffee I could not taste, watching the driveway through the window. My grandmother's letter was in my left pocket. My mother's letter was in my right. I had carried them both, every day, since finding them, like armor, made of paper and ink and love. The crunch of tires on gravel came at 10 o'clock sharp. Sterling Vance's black SUV turned into the driveway, but he was not alone. Sheriff Pickett's cruiser was already parked at the end of the road, blocking the exit, and the sheriff himself stood beside it, with two deputies flanking him. I walked outside, on steady legs. Sterling stepped out of his vehicle and froze. When he saw the sheriff, his face cycled through confusion, then anger, then something that looked very much like fear. "What is this?" he demanded. I walked toward him, holding the folder my grandmother had prepared for exactly this moment. "This is your contract." I held up the document with his forged signature. "And this is my grandmother's real signature." I held up the image from her video, the one showing the mark under the E. "See the difference?" He stared at the paper. "There is a mark under the E on every document she signed for the last 40 years, a secret mark. Your forgery doesn't have it." His face went gray. "That doesn't prove anything. Handwriting varies." "Maybe so, but this does." I pulled out the journal entry. "My grandmother wrote about you 8 years ago. She documented the day you came to her farm and tried to con her into signing a fake contract. She kept the unsigned version. She wrote that you were a fraud and that she would never do business with you. I let that sink in. She knew you would try again. She prepared for it. She left me everything I needed." Sheriff Pickett stepped forward, his hand resting on the cuffs at his belt. "Sterling Vance, you are under arrest for fraud, forgery, and attempted theft by deception." But I wasn't done. "And one more thing, Mr. Vance." He turned, his eyes locked on mine. "I know about my mother." His face went very still. "I know you worked here when she was 17. I know you stole from my grandmother. I know you hit my mother. I know you went to prison." I stepped closer. "And I know you have been waiting 40 years to take back what you never had. You wanted to hurt her the way she hurt you, by rejecting you, by having you sent to prison, by being a better person than you would ever be. You could not get my mother, so you came for the only thing she ever loved. This farm, this family, me." He said nothing. The deputies moved to handcuff him, but before they did, he spoke. "You don't know what your mother was." I held his gaze. "I know exactly what she was. She was 17. She was kind. She was lonely. She was the only daughter of a hardworking woman. And you were a grown man. Who chose to hurt her because she had the courage to say no?" The deputies pulled his arms behind his back. "She was a child, Mr. Vance, and you were a coward, and nothing you did then, or now, could ever change that. The only thing you accomplished is making sure she taught me, without ever meaning to, that some men are not worth a single tear." They walked him to the cruiser. Adelaide Marsh was arrested 2 days later. A whole network of forged contracts, coordinated code enforcement, bribed inspectors, targeted vulnerable families. It all came down because one stubborn old woman had refused to be afraid and had left her granddaughter the keys to bring it all down. 6 months later, I finished my first commissioned piece of furniture. Not the simple practice table that had held the key, but something far more ambitious. A dining table, made of walnut, using one of my grandmother's advanced designs. I studied it for weeks before attempting it. It took nearly 2 months of work, with many moments when I was certain I had ruined everything. The joinery was complex. The finish had to be perfect to showcase the grain. The whole time I was aware that I was trying to create something worthy of my grandmother's name. But I did it. I built something that would outlast me. the night I finished. Half the town came to see it. Bram and Winifred were there, Tate and his father, Pastor Etta, Sheriff Pickett in his Sunday clothes, Mr. Whitlock, who drove up from Burlington. We gathered around my table. For a dinner Winifred spent all day preparing, the first real celebration the farmhouse had seen since my grandmother's death. Opal would be so proud. Winifred ran her hand over the smooth walnut surface. She always believed you would find your way here. I looked around, at all the faces. That had become my world. Bram, who had helped me understand the land. Winifred, who had fed me, mothered me, when I did not know I needed it. Sheriff Pickett, who had fought beside me. Pastor Etta, who had prayed for me for 14 years without knowing my face. And Tate, who had become so much more than just a helpful neighbor. A year ago, I had been completely alone, convinced I would never belong anywhere. Now, I had more than I had ever dared to dream. After dinner, Tate and I sat on the porch. As the stars came out, the Vermont sky was enormous, filled with more stars than I had ever seen in Cleveland, each one sharp and bright against the darkness. I have been thinking, he said carefully, about what comes next for both of us. What do you mean? My family's organic farm, your furniture workshop. They could work together, a destination where people come to buy handcrafted furniture and fresh local produce, a place for people to learn traditional skills, something real and lasting. I looked at him, and in his eyes, I saw the same hope I felt in my own chest. Are you asking me to build something with you? Tate Calloway? He laughed softly. I am asking you to build something with me. Then yes, let's build something together. But there was one more thing I had to do before we could move forward. I had been thinking about it for months, about the girl I used to be, sitting on that narrow bed at St. Bernadette's, with everything she owned, in 3 bags, believing, with every cell in her body, that no one would ever come for her. I had been thinking about the other girls, the ones still on those narrow beds, in Cleveland, in Columbus, in every city in this country, aging out of a system that had nothing to offer them but a bus pass and a list of phone numbers. I told Tate. He nodded once. Whatever you need, we will figure it out. I called the Department of Child Services in Ohio. I told them I had room, I had work, I had a community, I had a home with 2 bedrooms upstairs that had been empty for 14 years. I told them if they had a girl who needed a place to land, I would catch her. They sent me Juniper Hollis. She was 19. She had been in the system for 11 years. She had aged out 2 months earlier. She had been sleeping in a shelter in Toledo. She arrived in February, the day she got off the bus in Burlington. I recognized her. Not her face, her eyes. Her eyes were exactly my eyes. 1 year ago, watchful, hard, waiting for the catch. I drove her to the farm. She didn't speak the whole way. I didn't push her. I had been her. I knew that the only language that worked was silence and patience and not flinching when she tested you. I showed her the room upstairs. Pastor Etta had filled it with hand-me-downs from the church. A quilt, a reading lamp, a worn Bible on the nightstand, 3 pairs of fuzzy socks. Juniper looked around. How long do I have to stay? As long as you want. As long as you don't want. There is no expiration. What is the catch? There isn't one. There is always a catch. Not here. She didn't believe me. I didn't expect her to, but she didn't leave either. She stayed. The first week she barely spoke. She ate, she slept, she walked the fields alone. She watched me work in the barn from a distance, without coming inside. The second week she came inside the barn. She did not say anything. She just sat. on an upturned crate and watched. The third week, she picked up a piece of sandpaper and started sanding a chair leg, the way she had seen me do. She didn't ask permission. She didn't apologize. She just did it. I didn't say a word. I just put another piece of sandpaper next to her and kept working. By the end of the first month, she was making her own joints. By the end of the third month, she was teaching me things I had not figured out yet. She had a gift, a real gift. She did not know it yet, but I did. My grandmother had taught me to recognize it. We called the place Opal's house, a workshop, a farm, a landing place for girls who had aged out of the system with no one waiting. We never charged them rent. We never asked for thanks. We taught them a trade. We fed them. We let them be quiet when they needed quiet, and we sent them out into the world when they were ready. Some stayed for months, some for years. Some came back, some never wrote, but every single one walked out the door, believing that at least one place in the world had been theirs. Time moved differently on the farm. Seasons turned, snow fell and melted, apple blossoms came and went, juniper grew, others came. A girl named Saoirse from Detroit, a girl named Belle from Pittsburgh, a quiet girl named Inez who barely spoke for 6 months and then one morning sang in the workshop, and we all stood very still and listened. 5 years after I first arrived at the farm, Tate and I got married in the barn, surrounded by furniture my grandmother had made and pieces I had created in the years since. Bram walked me down the aisle because I had no father to do it. He cried the whole way. Winifred went through an entire package of tissues. Sheriff Pickett wore his best suit. Mr. Whitlock drove up from Burlington to witness the day. Pastor Etta performed the ceremony. In the same Methodist church where she had baptized my mother, she held both my hands and looked at me. Your grandmother always believed this day would come. She wrote it in her journal once. Marlo will come home. She will build something good. She will love and be loved. And it will all have meant something. I believed her then, and I believe her now. Then she pronounced us husband and wife. The whole community was there, including 6 girls, who had once stood on the porch of Opal's house, wondering if anyone was going to come for them. Now they stood with flowers in their hair, watching me marry the kind young man who had stopped to help a stranger with a fence. I built one more thing. I had been planning it in my heart since the day I first read my grandmother's letter. She had set aside a piece of walnut, labeled, for something important. The wood was extraordinary, grain patterns that seemed to glow with inner light. I had been waiting until I felt worthy. I built a memorial bench, simple in design, but flawless in execution. Every joint perfect, every surface smooth as still water. On the backrest, I carved an inscription I had been composing since the day I arrived. Opal Ashby, she built with her hands and loved with her heart. I placed the bench under the old maple tree, beside the barn, the spot where Bram told me my grandmother used to sit between projects, watching the fields as the seasons turned around her. It faced the land. That had been in our family for 5 generations, the land that would stay in our family for generations more. On the 5th anniversary of my arrival, I sat on that bench as the sun set over Vermont. The sky turned orange, in pink, in deep purple, the same colors I had seen that first evening when Bram drove me up the driveway. And everything changed. An orange tabby cat we had named Sawdust, because she had walked into the barn one morning and never left. Curled up beside me on the warm wood. In my pocket was my grandmother's final letter, worn soft from years of reading. Tate walked up from the barn, sawdust in his hair and contentment in his eyes. He had learned the craft alongside me, and now we worked together in the workshop she had built, creating furniture that would carry pieces of our souls into the future. He sat beside me, took my hand, without speaking. We watched the colors fade from the sky, watched the stars appear, listened to the farm settling in for the night. I thought about everything that had brought me here, losing my parents when I was too young to understand. 14 years in a system that could not see me, the years of believing I was unwanted. And then the letter. That arrived on my last day at St. Bernadette's. The journey to Vermont. The discovery of a legacy I had never known existed. The grandmother who loved me from afar. The mother who tried to come home. The community that opened its arms. My grandmother did not give me my childhood. She could not, no matter how desperately she wanted to. The system, the distance, her own fears, had all conspired to keep us apart during the years when I needed her most. But she gave me a future. She gave me roots. She gave me a craft that would sustain me for the rest of my life. She gave me proof, in a lifetime of careful preparation, that I had been loved every single day, even when I did not know it. And sometimes, that is the greatest gift anyone can give. The stars came out one by one. Somewhere in the distance, an owl called. Sawdust's ears perked up. Then she settled back into sleep. I leaned into Tate's shoulder, felt the warmth and steadiness of him. In the morning, we would go back to work. There were orders to fill, young people to teach, a farm to run. The life we had built required constant attention, constant effort, constant love. But for now, in this moment, I was exactly where I was supposed to be. Home. If you have walked this entire journey with me, I want you to know something simple. Somewhere right now, there is a granddaughter wondering if she was ever loved. There is a daughter you have not spoken to in too long. There is a forgiveness waiting to be given or received. It is not too late to pick up the pen, to make the call, to open the door, to say, I am sorry, to say, I love you, to say, please come home, because love finds its way home, even across silent years. It found me, and it can find you too.